Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel virtual fringe meeting. Delighted everyone could join us today. We've been informed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel that Deputy Foreign Minister role is running circa 10 minutes late, but never one to be perturbed. I thought this was a great opportunity to invite the LDFI President, Lord Monroe Palmer, to have a bit of a preamble conversation with me before Deputy Foreign Minister role arrives. So, Monroe, good to see you. In less, very familiar surroundings individually, but less familiar surroundings in terms of a conference. How are you finding these virtual conference structures working for you?
Well, they work all right. In fact, we've really got accustomed to it because in the House of Lords we've been using virtual for nearly 2 years, really, and really the problem now is getting back to reality, and we're all crowding in now into the chamber. A lot of people are not masking up, and as in my job as a Deputy Speaker in the House of Lords, I'm required to be there in person, and we can't do it on the web anymore. So I don't like it. I must admit, I like meetings in person. I like it when we have conference fringe meetings and when you can have the to and fro from our friends and people who are not quite so friendly. Well, I can hear music.
I can hear music too. I don't know where that's come from. That's where it's come from. So I would tend to agree with that. Monroe, let's take the opportunity while we've got a few minutes before Deputy Foreign Minister joins the fringe. Obviously, we are now circa 3 months into the 36th government of Israel, what's been termed the Bennett-Lapid government. A lot of people were speculating the government wouldn't even get off the starting blocks. You had a real rainbow coalition of parties, including for the first time the Israeli Arab parties, some of the right-wing Israeli parties, and obviously our guest speakers party and our sister party in Israel, Yesh Atid. What are your reflections on 3 months in? Do you think they're doing a good job? Do you think they're in it for the long haul?
Well, the first is that, along with many other people, I'm probably amazed that it's lasted as long as it has, because there's such a wide spectrum of people in the coalition, from parties right from the Arab parties to parties of the right. But to many people's amazement, not really mine, the coalition, this rainbow coalition, has lasted and is really beginning to tackle some of the problems which have been concerning many Israelis as well as people in the diaspora. So what we're seeing is that there is new thought being given. There was very recently Yair Lapid, who's the prime mover behind the coalition, who's foreign minister, and he's been doing a really good job bringing other Arab countries into negotiation and diplomatic relations with Israel, and has also brought forward a terrific plan to help rebuild Gaza, taking very much the Liberal Democrat view, our view, that peace is not done by some international stroke of a pen, but by improving the situation of the people in Israel and in Gaza and in the West Bank. Very much on the situation in Northern Ireland, where only peace was obtained when the people felt they could live in peace.
You're obviously referring there to a movement that Lib Dem Friends of Israel have been pretty closely aligned with, which is the Middle East, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. And obviously there's the motion tomorrow, which seeks to endorse that alliance and that fund, and this issue around peaceful coexistence projects on the ground as a parallel track to diplomatic and political moves. I mean, I think your point there about people have maybe been a bit surprised that the Lapid-Bennett government has survived even beyond the 3 months is well made. The interesting thing, of course, is that it looks like the government's going to be able to get their budget through shortly, which would almost certainly guarantee that sees them through to the end of 2022, which would be a sort of hugely encouraging sign for everyone who wants to see this sort of rainbow coalition in Israel succeed, for both domestic and international issues and alignment in particular. Which would also suggest, of course, that we may even live to see a liberal, secular Zionist prime minister of Israel. You're long enough in the tooth to remember the days when Israel didn't have a right-leaning prime minister. Do you think we will see Lapid take up the hot seat and see the liberal, secular sister party of the Lib Dems running the country?
Well, the situation is that Yair Lapid from Yesh Atid, who is our sister party, Liberal Democrats' sister party in Israel, is the alternate prime minister, and I think he is due to take over 2 years from the beginning of the coalition government. I think it's probably optimistic to think that we're actually going to get to that alternate prime minister, but it is possible. But in the meantime, there is a lot of nation building going on and building up relations with the Arab states and elsewhere. I mean, I think, to my mind, people think you can just pass a motion at party conference, because we are here in party conference, and you can automatically get nearer to peace. But peace in Israel and for the rights of the Palestinians, the rights of the Israelis of all sorts, is going to be achieved when they feel that they've all got security, when they can all work together and all work for the economic good. But the idea that Yair Lapid has, which is to improve Gaza's situation, for instance, by building an island off the coast of Gaza for a port, for having desalination plants to deal with the water problem. These are the things which will make it better for the citizens of Gaza, who've been treated abominably by Hamas, and who hopefully will see that there is a peace dividend. Where you go from there, I don't know. I mean, but I think the first thing is to make sure that all Israelis, and by that I mean Jews, Arabs, Palestinians, people, Christians, everybody has better rights. And it's interesting to know, if people don't know, that in the current Israeli coalition government, there are members in the government of one of the Arab parties. And that party is raison d'etre, its reason for being there, is to improve the lot of the Palestinian citizens of Israel, be it with planning permission and ways in which they think, perhaps rightly, that they're not being given a fair track. But I'm going to give way, because I think I can see on the screen the Deputy Foreign Minister has now arrived. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you. Thanks, Monroe. Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel are delighted to host the relatively new Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, Idan role, to our first virtual Fringe event at Lib Dem conference. Deputy Minister role.
Gavin. Yeah. Wait a second. I think there's a sound issue, but I'll be sure to that.
Deputy Foreign Minister, can you hear us? We need the Deputy Foreign Minister to unmute himself. I'm assuming he's beaming to us live from Jerusalem. The wonders of modern technology, huh? I remember the days, Monroe, when we used to fly our foreign dignitaries over.
Can you unmute him? He's on mute, I think. But as one of you, as the organizer, ought to be able to.
I'll try a few times.
He's still muted.
Colleagues, forgive us. Give us a minute or two to connect. Deputy Foreign Minister, can you hear us? You're muted.
He's muted. Send him a message.
I'm doing all I can. While not being there.
Apologies for these technical difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, someone that's not me.
Deputy Foreign Minister, can you hear us?
Hi, hello.
Hello, welcome. I'm going to do
Good to see you all. Good to be here. We're just experiencing some technical difficulties. Our entire fancy Zoom system just broke down in a way.
Well, you're with us, and we're delighted you could join us. Let me introduce you.
Oh, wait! As we speak, things are looking up.
We've got sound on the other screen. Now we just need the
It's a lovely sukkah.
Camera. There we go. Deputy Foreign Minister, can you hear us?
He's disappeared.
לא, זה לא עובד. זה עובד מהמחשב.
We can hear you. You just have to speak up a little bit louder.
Sorry about that.
No, we've got you.
We might find a solution right now.
No, we've got you. We can hear you. We can see you.
And hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you and see you.
Just carry on.
Okay.
Brilliant.
That's great.
Okay. Let me briefly introduce you to the meeting. So, Deputy Minister Roll joined the Yesh Atid party and became head of its LGBTQ group in 2019. He's the founder of Proud Front, a movement dedicated to increasing the LGBTQ community's representation in Israel's political arena. In the Knesset, Deputy Foreign Minister Roll founded the parliamentary group to promote the Israeli high-tech ecosystem, and throughout the COVID-19 crisis promoted legislation to support small businesses, decreasing unemployment. Prior to his political career, Deputy Minister Roll is a lawyer and worked in law firms specializing in high-tech mergers and acquisitions. He's married to Israeli pop star Harel Skat and has 2 children, one very recently. So Mazel Tov, Deputy Minister. As you can imagine, the Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel are delighted to see that our friends in Yesh Atid have been able to form a broad coalition consisting of liberal Zionist centrists, the left, the right, and for the first time ever, an Israeli Arab party as a part of the official Israeli government. Following our incredibly successful meeting introducing the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Edward Davey, to the then leader of the opposition and chairman of Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid, now the new foreign minister and alternate Prime Minister of Israel, we're thrilled that Deputy Foreign Minister Roll is able to join us and technically can hear us and see us.
Yes.
Deputy Foreign Minister Roll, you've had quite a varied background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into politics.
So I initially got into politics as part of the efforts towards equality of the LGBTQ plus community in Israel. When my partner, well, at the time we weren't married yet. So when my to-be husband and I decided to form our family and have kids, we obviously realized that that wasn't possible via surrogacy in Israel because of the current law, which many changes have occurred since then. But that got me thinking that it was such harsh inequality, and it got me to be one of the leading activists in our community, and also to forming the organization Proud Front. And eventually, it led me to joining Yesh Atid because I realized by working with all parties in Israel, all political parties, I realized that Yesh Atid and we share a lot of values and ideas of the world in Israel, and I found it to be my natural political home. And so I joined. I led the LGBTQ caucus in Yesh Atid, and eventually also got elected to the Knesset.
Fantastic! What a story, and a sort of story of putting your mind to something and achieving it, and now ending up in the upper echelons of government. As we mentioned, Deputy Minister Rob, Yesh Atid are now the largest party in the new Israeli government, the most diverse in Israel's history. What's the inside story? How did Yesh Atid and your friend Yair Lapid mastermind this great political realignment?
Well, our coalition is quite a remarkable story because I view it as a very optimistic story and a very in a good side of politics. Israeli society has taken quite a hit due to COVID-19, both our economy and our society, and we were lacking a leadership that will do its best to unite our society and to better reflect all walks of life of our society. And what this coalition does, and what Lapid very insightfully and very greatly managed to do, was to realize that at this time, our society, Israel, needs a government that is unifying, a government that spreads the message of hope, a government that seeks to mitigate crises and seeks to work together. And I must say that starting off, it seemed like quite a difficult task. Many were skeptical about it, and I can see why. Some of the heads of the political parties in our coalition were never friends. Some of them never actually sat down together and have a conversation. But during the few long and very insightful weeks of forming this coalition, partnerships were made, and even more so, a relationship based on mutual trust was made. And as a politician, I can tell you that is not something to be taken lightly. And ever since, we are facing all kinds of, obstacles and questions in the way of leading this country, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and because, leading a country is a complicated matter. But we eventually make it each time we manage to sit down in good faith and discuss our differences of opinion and reach a joint decision. And this is something that is a tremendous thing in politics. And this is something that Minister Lapid has always stood for, because disagreement is okay. Disagreement is something that happens within families. Yeah. It happens inside politics. It's all about creating a discussion that is, in good faith, and coming to it in an attempt to actually reach a decision that is good for all sides. And so we have our differences of opinion, but we agree on most cases. And on those we don't agree on, we find a way to work it out. And this is something that is very special.
This will be very familiar to Liberal Democrats, as we entered a coalition with the Conservative Party in 2010, with obviously Nick Clegg as Deputy Prime Minister to David Cameron. And we understand about compromise. We understand about sitting around the table with your supposed political opponents. And that's something that's familiar to our party. And it's clear that with a government made up of parties from the left, right, and the centre, as well as Israel's Arab community, you won't agree on many things. The most prominent, especially to the international community, is that of Palestine and the peace process, which Prime Minister Bennett recently ruled out a two-state solution, and Defence Minister Gantz has recently met with Palestinian Authority President Abbas. What is this government's approach to the conflict, and how would you summarise it and give those who are deeply interested in this issue in this meeting an understanding of what we can expect from the new government?
Well, that's a good question. As you said, this is a coalition of 8 different parties, something that is not that common around the world. And we're doing something new. And we've managed to find solution for most things. I can say that we agree on 80% of things on issues in Israel. And yes, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is something that will most probably not be resolved entirely under this administration. Prime Minister Bennett has gone on record saying that he doesn't see a future for the two-state solution. Foreign Minister Lapid has gone on record saying that he does see it as a solution. What we can definitely say is that a year ago, annexation was on the table. It was heavily discussed. It was just a matter of when it will happen. And now we might not see a two-state solution in the near future, but we will also not see annexation. And I think this is something very significant for the for the worldwide community to realize. Also, and I want to tell you my philosophy on the matter, which is I'm outside in my sukkah, and there is also a lot of noise here. So
don't worry, carry on. We can hear you clearly.
Oh, great. Okay, so. I'm very proud that we have an Arab coalition and that we have an Arab minister. And I want to say that what I've learned to realize, what I grew to understand during my years, even before politics, is that people are not that different from one another. I know the conflict consumes a lot of the attention and media and politicians around the world, and it's a very serious thing. However, the civilians, they all want just to live their lives and to have a great future and good infrastructure and good education and good health system for their kids. And we have lots to do with the Palestinians on that aspect, on reaching out on economical and trade issues and trying to better the living of the Palestinians. You've probably heard Minister Lapid's new proposition for to better the lives of the civilians in Gaza, and we are and we firmly believe that humanitarian actions can be taken. Now it's up for Hamas to allow them to happen. Yeah. But we are always looking for peace, and we are always looking to better the lives of civilians. But it's a very intricate and complex situation when we can't just act on our own and help them.
Yeah, it dovetails nicely into something that members have been emailing us about, knowing that this fringe meeting was coming up. We as a group have recently spoken with a large proportion of our MPs and members of the House of Lords about the importance of peace building and coexistence projects, which I think, if reading between the lines of what you're saying, is almost in the absence or in the difficulty of finding immediate political solutions, that peace building and coexistent projects, possibly from the ground up, are a very positive way in which to expedite the political process as well. Obviously, you'll be aware of the Alliance for Middle East Peace and their objective to get more funding from across the world to fund, in the same way as was funded in Northern Ireland, these coexistence and peace building projects. Do you think these projects, in coordination with top level negotiations, can drastically shift opinions and eventually provide solutions to the conflict?
Personally, first and foremost, I want to thank each and everyone who are making efforts towards peace. I feel as a father now that it is my responsibility to do the best I can and to make it my best effort in order to make this a better world and a better country for my kids. So when I hear politicians, and they are rare, but when politicians say there is no, we don't believe in peace, there is no option for peace ever, I feel that's a very cynical way to look at the world, and it's part of our responsibility as political leaders to try and find every way to do it. And all of the civilian efforts are so valued. All those who are serious in advancing peace need to work to strengthen the Palestinian Authority and weaken Hamas. I'm unfortunately, and I know it makes things complicated, but it's all tied together. We need to condemn Hamas. We need to understand that there are civilians who are living under their terrorist regime, and we need to list Hamas as a terrorist organization. We need to find a way to work with the organizations that obey by the rules of by the international rules of the international community, and that work towards peace. And it's a big, it's a stretch, but we are always striving for peace, and we are always strengthening the organization that works toward it as well.
Yeah, it's not said often enough in terms of the designation of Hamas, and it's something that we feel pretty strongly about as well. I just wanted to touch on before we move on to the Abraham Accords, which again we've had a lot of people that are very interested in your views on the Abraham Accords. Recently, Ben & Jerry's announced they were going to stop selling their product in the West Bank, effectively boycotting the area. We, the Lib Dem Friends of Israel, oppose boycotts of any kind, as we think it does nothing to promote peace and coexistence in the region, and it also singles out Israel. We've got a motion going before the conference tomorrow, and there has been an amendment put in that seeks to exploit that settlement boycott dimension, which we're urging all supporters of two-state solution and peaceful coexistence to speak against. However, a few of our parliamentarians were disappointed to see the boycott that Ben & Jerry's expedited brandished as anti-Semitic by the Israeli government. Can you just give the Fringe meeting today an explanation as to why you think the Israeli government brandished Ben & Jerry's boycott as anti-Semitic?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, I agree. Boycotts are harmful. They do nothing to bring peace. I think that, as a liberal legislator, I greatly believe in social responsibility by corporates.
Yeah.
And I think it could do amazing things. And I applaud every corporation that takes time, effort, and money in order to better our society. However, I think in this case, Ben & Jerry's have it all wrong. Boycotting an entire country is not the way to provoke good things. It's not the way to provoke peace agreements. It's not the way to better the lives of any of the civilians on either side. One of the repercussions of their action will be, unfortunately, to close down the Ben & Jerry's factory in Israel, which is a unique factory where Arabs and Jews work together and provide for their families. So it's such an unfortunate example of how something that is miseducated maybe or not thought through can create damage. I don't think that their decision is anti-Semitical, but I do think, however, that it's wrong on many levels.
That's very helpful, and sort of sharing that point about the closure of the factory that would then ultimately have hurt economically Israeli Arabs as well as Israelis is a great example of where this type of action is counterintuitive. Moving on to the Abraham Accords, as I mentioned, they were a significant success of the last government. The normalization of relations between Israel and other Arab Muslim states shouldn't be taken as a given, should it? And peace with the UAE, Sudan, Bahrain, and Morocco is a complete change in attitude from the Arab world, from our perspective. Can you tell us about the importance of the Abraham Accords, and if you and the Foreign Minister are looking to continue to expand these historic agreements?
Well, most definitely, the Abraham Accords are a paradigm shift in the region, and it's a funny thing in a way because it's interesting to see how quickly we adjust to new things. I mean, it's such an impressive achievement, and it has been opening so many doors for all sides, and yet I get to hear quite often that okay, but you weren't in war with them, so it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, and the fact that we have ministers on on both sides, going back and forth. Minister Lapid was there. We just welcomed the new ambassador of Bahrain. Embassies are being open. I'm expected to go to the Emirates next month, and I'm actually excited to say that we are doing a lot in order to broaden this cooperation and all the benefits of the accord. Unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of things have been put on hold because, tourism-wise and some of the trade joint ventures, a lot of things are taking more time. But we intend, and we have many of our ministers working on that in their fields. We intend to cooperate in research, on academy, tourism, trade, economic ventures, and we all feel that as part of the pandemic crisis, there are also possibilities for new growth. And this is definitely one of them. And I believe that we will see more countries join the Abraham Accords and their normalization in this region. And I'm positive that we haven't seen even the beginning of the benefits for all sides due to these agreements.
That's fantastic, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of yours and Foreign Minister Lapid's labours over the coming months. Having said that, despite these success stories, there are some things which aren't so positive in the Middle East politically, and Lebanon seems to be in a very difficult and tumultuous situation. Just can you give us a feel for what the government's view on the sort of instability on the northern border is? Where do you see things as they stand?
Well, what is happening in Lebanon is tragic. I actually sat with a few of our finest experts in regards to Lebanon 2 weeks ago because I wanted to learn in depth the situation there, economically, socially, and to better understand the living situation of the civilians over there. The tragedy unfolding in Lebanon, unfortunately, is just the beginning. And while we understand the roots of it, I believe that many parts of the world they still don't necessarily connect the dot. This is the example of what happens as part of Iran's terroristic grasp of the Middle East, of the whole region. When Iran and its proxies, in this case Hezbollah, take Lebanon as vessel, as something to use and suck all of its resources with complete disregard to its civilians and to the well-being, this is the unfortunate result. And I think require the international community's full and complete dedication in order to try and better the lives of Lebanese people and hopefully rebuild that country. But that needs to be side by side with action upon Iran's proxies all throughout the region, because unfortunately at the moment they're just taking this country, Lebanon, as some sort of a place to hold their missiles and to use their land and resources, and it's going in a more tragic direction.
Yeah, that's a good summary. I think we just need to all kind of keep a watching brief on it and see where it goes. Moving on to the US, which is never far from Middle Eastern politics. Former Prime Minister Netanyahu was often accused of cozying up to President Trump and the Republican Party in the US, as well as other nationalist and populist leaders, thus making Israel and the Middle East a partisan issue. Is Israel attempting to now reset relations with the Democratic Party and other progressive parties around the world, like our very own Liberal Democrats?
Well, the United States is Israel's most cherished ally and friend, and that will never change. We intend to strengthen this relationship with both parties. Prime Minister Bennett had a wonderful visit with President Idan, and they shared some excellent ideas. Foreign Minister Lapid has spoken with Secretary Blinken a few times, and is expected to go to Washington soon. And also, we've had we've had dozens of senators from both parties visit Israel. This government sees the vital nature of the bipartisan relationship, and we intend to do everything in order to keep a good and solid and open communication with both parties.
And extending that, Deputy Minister, in terms of parties like the Liberal Democrats and other sort of mainstream centrist parties around the world, is that something on the agenda of the MFA at the moment?
We are looking in, well, it's a new year here, according to the Jewish New Year's, it's a new year. And a new year, Rosh Hashanah, which was just, last week, is a great time for resolutions. And one of our resolutions for this administration and for our ministry, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, is to seek new opportunities and to broaden our relationships all throughout the world. We are not limited to any specific countries or parties. We seek new ties and to strengthen current ties based on shared values, and whoever share our values and perspective of the world and share our liberal and values and also share our message of hope, I think that's a great way to start a relationship.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that. Now, moving on to Israel's liberal civic society, the Lib Dem Friends of Israel often champions Israel's liberal credentials, especially its thriving LGBTQ+ community in Tel Aviv. One of the defining principles of our party is to fight for inclusion and equality, especially for the LGBTQ+ community in the UK. We know there are often significant challenges facing gay rights activists. You've been at the forefront of this fight. How's it going? What are the challenges you face in Israel? And more importantly, are you winning?
I feel like we're winning, step by step. But we're winning. It's not about winning. It's about doing what's right and doing better for the next generation. And I already feel responsible for the next generation because I have two of them at home. First of all, I want to thank you for your support of our community, because I've been hearing great things ever since I joined politics, and I appreciate that. And I feel like when big parties, and take causes like ours and make them mainstream and make them seen and heard, that is massive. That is so tremendous. We are a young country, and while there are some things that we are lacking, we still can get married legally here. We can be registered if we married outside. We can't adopt yet, but the majority of things, the majority of rights, we've achieved. And I have the privilege of being part of this government and working towards bettering the lives of my community from the inside, as they say. For example, amazing things are happening. 2-3 weeks ago, the Minister of Health declared that gay people will now be able to donate blood. And this makes us one of few countries in the world that allow that enable the gay community to donate blood. And by doing so, putting an end to a very discriminatory clause in the agreement of blood donation, asking you to specify who have you been having sexual relations with. And I feel like this is a great step forward, and I'm very thrilled that this was done under our government, and I think there is more to come. Our Supreme Court just declared that surrogacy for same-sex couples will be legal now in Israel, and we are working towards changing the regulations in order to allow the capacity of surrogates and to make sure everything is done correctly and with extreme how do you say extreme care towards the surrogates, and we have to change regulations in order to accommodate all of the new families that we're expecting from the LGBTQ plus community. But it will happen, I guess, in 6 months to maybe 1 year, and that's very exciting. As someone who's done 2 surrogacies in the States, I can't wait to start seeing, families become families and couples create their families here in Israel with their families standing outside the door in the hospital, and everything done in Hebrew and everything done so close. So things are developing very quickly, and I'll be here to make sure that they progress the way they should.
Excellent. Fantastic. A real inspiration, and certainly for our party. This is a message that we want to be heard very loud and clear, and you're an inspiration sitting where you do and having achieved what you've achieved in your life today. So we just want to move on in terms of the liberal civic society theme. Another sort of much spoken about minority in Israel are the Israeli Arab community. In your new government, there are some unlikely partners. One of those being Ra'am, the Islamic Party, the first Arab Israeli party to form an official part of a governing coalition. Israel is often labelled wrongly, clearly, as an apartheid state by its detractors. How is that possible if there are a number of Israeli Arab ministers? Ultimately, what's life really like for Israel's Arab community, and what plans do the government have for this really unique community in Israel?
Well, I will not go and say that we are a perfect country. Obviously, we are working towards bettering a lot of different aspects of our society. But I'm very proud to be part of a coalition that has, that has an Arab party and a government that has Arab minister. 20% of our society are Arabs, and so for the first time, we have a government that better reflects this intricate mosaic of the Israeli society. Unfortunately, in great parts of the world, they are seeing a very or at least receiving a very distorted reality of the Israeli society and the way Arabs are living their lives here. When you live here, you see it for what it really is, and you go to major universities and you see our professors, and you go to major hospitals and you see high-level executives from the Arab society, and you realize that things are not one-dimensional as they are portrayed. As for the apartheid claim, it's simply absurd and outrageous. I mean, either someone who's claiming Israel to be an apartheid country either has no clue what apartheid was, or has no clue what Israel is all about and never visited here, or is just maliciously trying to manipulate the truth and portray us as an apartheid country. I would never live in an apartheid country, and I can safely say that it has the term apartheid has nothing to do with Israel, and it's one of my jobs here in this ministry to better convey that message and to spread insights and information to try and put to showcase the real Israel and the way our society is handled here.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm conscious that you've got other obligations. I'm going to hand over to Lord Palmer, who you can see on your screen. But before I do, we wanted to ask you one final question. It sort of relates to that point you just made, which is we often feel that we're on the defensive against those who try to delegitimize Israel, question its existence, and attempt to spread disinformation about Israel and the Jewish people. Now, as one of the leading figures of Israel to the outside world, an ambassador of the Jewish people, what do you say to these people? And once you've answered that, I'll hand over to Lord Palmer to say a vote of thanks.
Well, one of my main tasks here, as I mentioned, is forming a new way of better conveying life here in Israel outside. And unfortunately, Israel hasn't been doing a good enough job in recent years. As a result of other sides and organizations trying to delegitimize Israel, who are very well funded and very well organized and have numerous people working on their projects, we need to do a better job at sharing the Israeli story and telling our, not even our side of things, just sharing the complete, wonderful, intricate narrative of the Israeli society. The state of Israel doesn't have one narrative. No one owns the narrative of the state of Israel. We are a collective of individuals that live here together and share opinions and disagree on other things, and we live different lives and we share some things, and we need to start putting these stories out there to better showcase the wonderful side of the Israeli society and tell the world that we indeed work well together and live well together, despite, all kinds of disagreements. However, the first thing I would suggest to anyone, which is not highly possible at the moment, unfortunately, due to COVID, is to visit Israel, because, we have so many different research that shows that once people get here, they understand Israel to its fullest, and it speaks volumes. But we can't bring everyone here, and so I'm delighted, and also realizing the magnitude of my task when trying to build another way to showcase life here in Israel for those who can't come and visit. But for you guys, for those of you who are watching me now, and if you can come, just come to Israel. You'll have fun, and you'll just see for yourselves that there's no other way, there's no better way than just coming here and talking to the people and tasting the food and seeing the culture, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the South, everything, and just, seeing for yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm going to hand over to Lord Palmer, and I'll mute myself. Just so as you're aware, we do bring delegations of parliamentarians over, and next time we do, we would love to see you and maybe break bread. But over to you, Monroe.
Well, thank you very much, Gavin. You've covered a vast amount of subjects, and my particular thanks from us all to Deputy Foreign Minister Roll. It's been great hearing from you, covering such a wide range of issues. It's also good to see you in your sukkah, your temporary dwelling in Israel, and how things have moved from the wilderness. There were many TV screens in sukkahs in the wilderness, and we see one on the wall. So things have moved on. But we do feel that not only thanking you, but that you and Foreign Minister Lapid have a real big role, because you are the foreign ministries, and you haven't mentioned Jordan and Egypt, but I'm sure that you are working hard to bring them closer to Israel and its current government. Meanwhile, trying to look at Lebanon and see what can be done to help there in an almost intolerable situation. But my thanks to you and for Gavin for chairing this meeting, and for you taking part. And I hope that next year you or one of your colleagues will be able to come to the Liberal Democrat Conference, probably in a seaside town in the UK, rather than on virtual television. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Foreign Minister Roll.
Thank you for having me. It was a true pleasure. And thank you all for being true partners of Yesh Atid and of Israel. And I want to thank you for all your work and for taking the time to meet with me. And hopefully next year, we'll do it in person.
Or as we say, next year in Jerusalem, possibly.
Next year in Jerusalem, but not via Zoom, in real life.
Excellent. Deputy Foreign Minister, thanks so much. Feel free to log off. We have about 9 minutes remaining on the Zoom. Monroe and Toby, I've got you both on the screen. Toby, some reflections on what the foreign minister said. Pretty inspiring and uplifting, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think it's a complete different change in tune from the last 12 years. It seems like a breath of fresh air. I mean, it's not everything we've ever wanted, but it's close to be honest. I think it's quite remarkable. I
mean, people have to remember, I suppose, that as with the Lib Dems in coalition in 2010 through for 5 years, it's converse here. The Yesh Atid are the largest party, but they are deeply incumbent upon keeping the coalition together in order to keep the government together. So, they aren't going to be able to roll out an entirety of their agenda. But Monroe, what were your key takeaways from what the Deputy Foreign Minister said to the Fringe today?
Well, first of all, reading the chat, I'd like to say that the fact that we haven't been able to take questions from the audience is really a question of the system rather than us. We would have rather been able to take questions from the audience, but the system hasn't allowed us to do so. In fact, it's been quite a job to actually get to this stage. I thought I was never going to get on, even if I'm one of the speakers. And because points have been made in the chat that the Israeli newspaper Haaretz doesn't always say positive things. And that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? That there's a country in the Middle East where the newspapers can say what they want about the government. They can be as nasty about them as we are about the Conservative government in this country. And they're not put up against the wall and shot or their legs chopped off. And that is the wonder that is Israel, that it is very as a freedom of the press. And it's something other countries in the Middle East do well to emulate.
Well, yeah, just on that point, Monroe, I mean, I was pretty struck by the fact that we had in front of us, a minister of a liberal secular Zionist-led government who's a real champion of LGBTQ plus community, and he's married, they have children. He's really a leader in that space, and for our party to have someone like that address our conference and talk so enthusiastically, and often this aspect of Israeli society is just sort of passed over, never mentioned. What we have here is a country and a government advocating for freedom and equal rights, and the LGBTQ plus community in Israel has a fantastic champion right in the heart of government. What were your takeaways from what Deputy Minister said about that stuff?
I mean, within our party, it's if you're a member of the gay community, there is a country you can go to and know that you're not going to be discriminated against. There are people in the government from within that community. That women in Israel play a very, very vibrant part in that community. And when you compare that with what's happening in Afghanistan with the Taliban, this is a beacon of hope in Israel. Now there are, as one of the two of the items in the chat have said, yes, life is not ideal. There are problems, but they are problems which can be solved if people work together in one way or another. They're not all going to be solved, but the idea of Palestinian rights is being fostered very much by the members of the Palestinian community who are in the government. From acorns, what do they call? From little acorns, trees grow. I can't remember the old saying, and that's where we are. We've got to plant the acorns and let them grow.
In the chat, David McKenzie comments, Hamas would hang Minister Idan Rolls simply for being a gay man, and that's absolutely correct. And we must champion these attributes of Israeli society. Toby, I thought his comments about the Ben and Jerry's situation were pretty impressive. He didn't agree with the government line of the time that those boycotts were anti-Semitic, but he did speak very passionately about the fact that boycotts harm everyone. And that, I mean, the Ben & Jerry's example there of, you know, a big factory was closed as a consequence of that decision, which in large part hurt more Israeli Arabs than it hurt anyone else who worked in the factory. What was your take on that side of the conversation?
So, I mean, like you said when we were putting the questions to the Deputy Foreign Minister, that, you know, we very much oppose settlement expansion and occupation. However, we do. There is, it's, as we said, it's a complex situation, but I'm not going to just say it's a complex situation and not answer it. But the idea that there is an argument. Some people, they say there is an argument to boycott produce, but the issue is, as you said, that we don't. It does nothing to promote peace, but inflame further tensions. So we're trying to encourage the Palestinians and Israelis to get around the negotiating table or start up coexistence and peace building projects. And by deciding to hurt Israeli businesses or Israeli workers would not do that. That would completely, it would incense the government of the day or the people, and they would fuel further mistrusts and opposition to any sort of positive moves. Because I guess in the terms of the sort of carrot and the stick analogy of trying to do that, you're hitting them with a stick. You're not saying this is what you can achieve from a peaceful solution. It's naughty. And the thing that obviously sticks with me occasionally is that there aren't these calls for boycotts of other companies in other countries for alleged breaches of international law. We oppose the occupation, as I said. I don't have to repeat it again, but there is this sort of double standard that does raise eyebrows for me personally. I do think there is a unique singling out of Israel for their actions, which, while I do have opposition to, there is this underlying feeling. You know, how many countries do Ben & Jerry's stop selling their ice cream in? I don't know if they are active in other countries, but it's a weird thing to do for a country that is supposedly, is an ally of the West and is also a liberal, thriving democracy.
Yeah.
Why would you start to do that first? What do you think?
Yeah, I think they're all good points, and it's never quite it's never really exclusively linked just to settlements, of course, because they used that as the reason they were withdrawing from settlements, but the impact was felt in Israel proper, where, as Deputy Foreign Minister Roll intimated, the factory in Israel closed, which affected negatively all of the Israeli Arab workers. So it's there, and it has an impact and an effect in a way that you can't just delineate. It can't just delineate on administrative boundaries. I'm conscious of the time. Monroe, would you like to sum up the today's Fringe and draw the meeting to a close? We have 1 minute. I'm going to hand over to you, but thank you to everyone who's participated. Lovely to see some familiar faces. And anyone who wishes to get involved in LDFI, come on our website, ldfi.org.uk. Sign
Follow
up.
us on Twitter as well, please.
On Twitter. We'll hand over to our president, Lord Palmer.
Well, it doesn't leave really much to say, but I think we've covered a lot of things. I'm sorry we didn't get questions from the audience, but that was a technical thing for the conference rather than us. Hopefully next year in person we'll be able to have that to and fro. I would just like to make emphasize one point which the Deputy Foreign Minister said, and that is the present coalition of government is now against further annexation on the West Bank. It is against annexation, and let's put that to bed. It's against any form of apartheid. Let's put that to bed. Boycotts are not going to help anyone. What's going to help people is getting the economy going and the rights of all citizens of Israel and the territories to be improved. From there, we can grow more. And what we want to see as Liberal Democrats is a two-state solution with a secure Israel and a secure and prosperous Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest.
I would just like to say, if anyone wants to contact with us with any questions, we can get some answers for people from us, from our perspective, and from friends and colleagues in Israel as well. If you want to send some of those questions in, we're happy to answer them when we have more time.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.